Yep, we're off. Right, okay, so it's still Thursday, 8th of December, just. So we'll crack on with the second one, and then I can get cracking on with editing and uploading, and I'm not going to get it in before the day's out, but it'll be slightly delayed. So next one on the list is Strathisla, which is a miniature that was very kindly donated by Mr. X. Thank you very much, Mr. X. Now, I don't know how long he's had this miniature, but there is a little bit of a low fill level on it, so I'm hoping, because it's not massively low, but it's, we'll see, I'm hoping it's still going to be a fair representation of what Strathisla stands for. So Strathisla is here in the village town of Keith, and it was founded in 1786 by two gentlemen, George Taylor and Alexander Mill. Now 1786 is obviously quite a bit before a lot of distilleries were set up. There are some arguments as to whether this is maybe not the oldest distillery in Scotland, possibly the oldest continually operating distillery in Scotland, or at the very least it's the oldest Speyside distillery. But when it was set up, it was actually originally known as Milton or Milltown. It was named after the Milltown Castle that was nearby, and it changed to Strathisla quite a bit later. You're looking at 1870, so we're looking at just under 100 years later. It changed to Strathisla. Now Strathisla is it's near the River Islay, Isla, nothing to do with Isla, the island, and Strath is a Gaelic word for like shallow valley, so it's essentially like the low valley or the shallow valley of the River Islay. It went back to Milton in 1890, and it was having numerous owners, nothing particularly major. It was kind of like this and that and the other, until 1950, when it was bought by Chivers Brothers and was renamed Strathisla and stuck as Strathisla from 1951 onwards. Now Chivers Brothers actually wanted to buy it, but just before they took it over, it was owned by a guy called George Pomeroy, who was not a fraudster, but basically knew how to play the games. And Chivers wanted to buy the distillery from him, and he said, you can have it, but it's going to be X pounds. And it was a ridiculous amount of X pounds. So they went, no, sorry, that's far too much, we're not interested. But then a few years later, he ended up getting done for tax evasion. Everything caught up to him, whole thing went bankrupt, and Chivers went, I think we'll have that distillery now, thank you very much. So they now own Strathisla, and they still do now. Pernod Ricard took over in 2001, and it was in 2004 that the official bottling 12-year-old, of which this is, was launched. Now this is 43%, and I'm hoping you'll be able to see it. Now this used to be, the labelling's changed, but it used to be that logo, but it was like a dark green. It was more of a square bottle, I can remember it. Was very, very traditional, looked quite old. Now they've relaunched it, I think last year maybe, and it now looks like this. A nice looking bottle, to be perfectly honest. I do quite like the design. I have a soft spot for the old Strathisla bottle. I don't know why. I think it's because I used to see it on shelves, and a bit like Pinwinnie, it was kind of like this old looking bottle that made it look older than it actually was. So the new version of Strathisla is actually 40%, not 43%. So whether that makes a massive difference or not, I don't know. Now it's actually not very far away from the Glenkeith distillery, and it turns out that rather than distilling the spirit and then putting it into casks at the distillery, they actually pipe it to Glenkeith. Glenkeith is that close, and put it in casks there. Some goes back to the distillery to go in the warehouse, but others go to Chivers Brothers Central Warehouse. So it travels a bit before it even gets into any kind of cask. Now that's not really going to affect the flavour, because I don't think it's that far, and it's not taking that long to get there. I believe it's sherry matured, is my understanding, which probably means it's bourbon matured, because it's a 50-50 and I normally get it wrong. So hopefully, I know there's been a bit that's evaporated out of here. It's not too much that it's going to affect the flavours by a lot. You're looking at 32 quid Whisky Exchange are selling that new version for anyway. Now, probably with it being a label change, you've instantly got some, like a cut-off point of when this old bottling was out. So you might find this older version starts creeping up in price because it becomes a collector's item. But I don't know whether they will have changed, well, they've knocked it down from 43 to 40%. Whether they would have changed the flavour profile a great deal, don't know. Couldn't tell you, to be honest. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be masked a little bit. It does smell a little bit woody, a little bit too woody for my liking. There is some nice sweetness in there, though. It has to be said. There's quite a nice, like a sultana. It's not raisins, it's sultanas. It's slightly lighter than raisins. This is a sultana-y nose, so it's fruity, but it's not really like dark fruit cake. It's more of a lighter fruit, like a lighter fruit cake. So not a heavy, rich, dark fruit cake, not Dundee cake or anything like that. But when you get fruit cakes, it's like farmhouse cake, where it's like a fruit cake where there's not quite as much fruit in it, and it tends to be more lighter sultanas than dark raisins, and steeped in spirits. It tends to be more of a fruit cake where it's the fruit's been steeped almost in water just to plump it up, and it's more lighter. But there's just a little bit too much woodiness on the nose for my liking, but we'll see. It's got to be said, it's a cracking colour as well. Ooh. Okay, it's not as woody. Okay, either what's evaporated is a bit of the actual flavour profile of the whiskey itself, because it feels a little bit thin, or it's just incredibly smooth and incredibly easy drinking. That light fruitcake character carries through. There is a sultana feel to it. It's not, again, it's not raisins. It's not raisins and currants. This is definitely sultanas and lighter fruits, glacé cherries almost as well. It's very, very silky. Almost too much, almost to the point where I'm thinking, actually, this is lost a little bit too much. But it's not a woody dryness, which I've had with some of the others, the Glenturret, for example, where I'd lost so much out of the miniature because it was that old, that it was literally like chewing on the end of a pencil. This has gone the other way, where it's so light and so smooth that it makes me wonder whether actually there's lost some fruitiness and depth to it. Also, the fact that it doesn't I wouldn't have said it's 43%. I'd said there's 40 through and through. It's light. It's very, very silky. The mouth feels a little bit too light though, and it does make me wonder whether something's missing. It feels like something's missing. It feels like there's some depth, there's some character to it. It feels like it needs a bit more, not a punch, not an alcoholic kick. It feels like it needs more fruit and more malt and just some more depth to it, just to give it a bit more weight. It just feels slightly too light, and it really does feel like there's something missing. So I don't feel this is what Strathisla should be. I don't think it's far off, and I think it's good. I like what's in there. I hope that there would be a little bit more to it. Otherwise, if this is what Strathisla was tasting like, whether it tastes like that now, it's almost a little bit too thin. I think people would think there's not really a lot to that. There's not a lot. There's not a lot in this glass. Christ, I nearly dropped it. There's not a lot in this glass, which is why I feel like it's lacking something because of the evaporation. Because if that's what it's supposed to be like, it is a little bit thin. There is some characteristics in there that are nice. There's some fruitiness in there that's very, very pleasant. There's a touch of maltiness to it, but it just needs more. And it really does. So if you've had the new Strathisla, or if you've had Strathisla recently, let me know what you thought of it. Let me know whether there was just, there's more body to it, like that it feels like there should be. Or if the version you had as well did feel thin. This feels almost slightly watered down. Almost like it's been diluted down to 40%, because it doesn't taste like 43. It really doesn't. It's interesting. but it's always the problem. And miniatures aren't fantastic for giving you the best, absolute best representation of a whiskey, which is always difficult anyway, because you're never going to get the perfect scenario to drink every single whiskey that you ever drink exactly the same and be able to do direct comparisons. But miniatures don't have great seals. You know, this hadn't been opened, and yet, you know, it is literally just a metal cap with a bit of cardboard in the top. It's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. And if it's a miniature that's been sat on a shelf for a while, depending on where that's been kept, you're going to get some evaporation, and it's not going to be a fair representation of the whiskey itself. It intrigues me enough that I would like to try and find the new Strathisla and see what that's like. I think there's enough there that I'd go, do you know what? Yeah, it's worth a punt. And to be honest, for 32 quid for a 12-year-old official bottling, that's a pretty decent price. I think that's worth a punt. I really do. I think if there's, as I hope, there's just a little bit more depth to that, I think for 32 quid, I think you've got an absolute cracker there. I think it's good. That is nice. I'm enjoying it. It's just lacking a little bit. It's just a little bit too thin. And even if it was like that, yeah, okay, it's a bit thin, but it's going to be easy to drink. You're going to easily get through the bottle with no complaints whatsoever. Right, it's late, very late, and I'm absolutely knackered, and I still need to do some editing. So I need to crack on. I shall see you in the next one. Cheers.